things up. So this is for you and anybody who wasn't here to hear. If you are absent, then you can make it up by watching classes. So I'll be recording during your guys' live classes. So I don't have anybody scheduled to be online. So I'll just record it and then I'll post it so that if you're absent a day, you can still get your points for that day by watching the Zoom class, watching the whole video and answering the question at the end. So, or like let me know if you want to do live. You're doing live that day for all your Zoom classes. If you want to do a live class, just let me know, like, hey, I'm going to be on tomorrow online, and then we can do a live class. I'm totally fine with that, okay? If that's what you want to do. Totally fine with it. Just let me know ahead of time. Also, mid-quarter deadline is February 11th. Mostly mention this again because now I'm recording it. Making sure kids who are not here today get this information. So, just to help you guys stay accountable, because you shouldn't be turning things in at the very last day of the quarter that we did at the very beginning of the quarter. That's just beyond what's acceptable. So right now it is officially not acceptable for all of your classes that in the middle of the quarter, which is February 11th, we will not accept anything after if you did before. Okay? No exceptions. You do it before. That got approved by the board. So they are okay with that. I think it should be more than that. I think we should have like a 2-week, like you turn in within 2 weeks or I won't accept it kind of thing. Like keep yourself accountable, basically. All right, today in history, Iran hostage crisis ends. Have you guys ever heard of that before? So we've had like an iffy history with Iran. Iran's kind of they've had a lot of things going on in that area. I mean, it's the Middle East. There's been a lot of tensions going on in this area, which is the Middle East region, right? So last year, if you remember, we almost had that, scare where are we going to go into war with Iran because we know we assassinated one of their military leaders and they were bombing places that had American soldiers in it. Luckily, no one died, but it could have turned into a war. It could have. They are this similar causes similar to those things that happened last year caused wars in the past. So if we follow history, it could have started a war. Luckily it didn't, because then we didn't have to lose more lives, but it could have. So anyway, so what happened is Iran had a leader and his people didn't like him. So when he was ousted or removed from power, he, and I can't remember if we helped him escape or if he escaped and came to America. I don't remember which one. Either way, he ended up in America and we let him into our hospitals and we treated him and then he was free. And the Iran people were very mad about this because they did not like this guy. And they're like, why are you holding him? You should release him to us and let us out. And, so they were mad at us. So do you guys know what an embassy is?
What?
An embassy. So here's my weird USA country. Actually, let's do Iran because we're talking about Iran, so I won't do my horrible drawing of the US. Let's see. That's kind of shape of Iran. So in their capital city, they have a bunch of buildings that are embassies, and one is the US Embassy. So what an embassy is for is if there are US citizens who are in this country, they can go to the US Embassy and take care of any passport issues. Maybe they are US citizens, but they broke a law here, so they're going to use the US ambassadors to kind of help be a mediator in this situation. And then also, if someone who is a US citizen goes to the US Embassy, they are on US soil and they're protected by US laws. So if they say, here's this rug is the embassy, if I commit a crime in this country and I run to the embassy, I'm safe, they can't arrest me because I'm in US soil. Now, as soon as I leave, I'm, subject to their disposal and their rules and laws, but as long as I'm in there, I'm safe. Or unless my country wants to extradite me, which they could. If they're like, yeah, you're guilty, we're not gonna protect you, because that makes us look bad if we're protecting you, because you're so guilty. We're gonna hand you over. And that's what happens sometimes. So this embassy, so what they did is after they were mad at us, they stormed the US Embassy and they took hostages. They captured everybody who was there, hundreds of people, and after a while, they let go anybody who was not a U.S. citizen. So anybody from another country, they let them go because they're mad at us, right? Not other countries, they're mad at us. So then they kept only U.S. citizens. And then after a few months, they let go anybody who was a woman or a minority because their argument was, you guys have been oppressed by the U.S. government at some time, so we're going to take it easy on you. We'll let you guys go. So they basically kept the white men. Okay, was the last people. So those people were there a total of 14 months. Now, usually in a hostage crisis, you know, a few days, a few weeks are like the really long, rare ones. They usually don't even last that long, but this one was over a year. Okay, so during that year, when they were mostly being hostages, Jimmy Carter was president, and I guess for some reason they didn't like him. I didn't even look into why they didn't like him, but for some reason, any negotiations to try to release the hostages were just like, nope. And then when Ronald Reagan was elected, he wasn't president yet, but he was elected right after the November elections, then they started negotiations. For some reason, they liked Ronald Reagan. Again, I haven't looked into why, but they did. So today in history, because today is Inauguration Day, right, just a few minutes after he was inaugurated and became president, Iran let go of the rest of the hostages. So that crisis ended on Inauguration Day because they were waiting for him to be president. Some political thing, I don't know what it is. So that's what happened today in history. Today in the news, we have a new president, right? Joe Biden is our president now. Today is kind of like, I call it day 0, but maybe it's like 0.5, because this morning was technically the last part of the last day of President Trump's presidency, and part of the first day of Joe Biden's presidency. It's not really a full day for either, because as soon as they're inaugurated, it begins the next presidency, right? His first full day of his term will be tomorrow. So his first day is not considered today. Neither is this day considered Trump's last day. So it's like, it's kind of in between. So that's why I call it day 0, because it's in between, right? That's where the 0.5 comes from. So always on this day, there's several things that happen whenever this presidency power is shifted from one to another. You have the outgoing president who does last minute pardons. It's a power they're given in the Constitution. It fully says they can do it. So President Trump delivered like a little bit over 70 pardons. And yes, some of you guys have heard of Lil Wayne was pardoned. He wasn't, it was a charge related to what, holding a weapon. I don't know what the whole details of the charge is. Something with a weapon. Another rapper had a similar charge with a weapon that was on him, and he was charged for that. He was also pardoned. There's like a boyfriend of someone who is accused of being a spy. He was let go. There's someone who was convicted of money laundering. There's another person who was convicted of tax evasion. So there's a lot of, especially some people who were close to Trump, who were convicted of some things, and I can't remember what they were. I mean, there's only over so many people who were pardoned. So always that's the last thing to go, right? That's like the very last thing that presidents do is they pardon a bunch of people. Sometimes they'll do an executive order, and this is every president. Every president has always done pardons basically the morning of their last day, okay? Like Trump did this morning. And then after inauguration happens, and it's the new presidency, a bunch of brand new executive orders goes into play. So executive orders today, some of them, there was like 17, I think, executive orders that he wanted to do. So one of them is he wants to have all of everybody who is in federal office take an ethics pledge, where they pledge to be ethical and to not be racist and to appreciate and, not be judgmental and things like that, basically be ethical. So he's going to require an ethics pledge. He also is going to do an executive order to extend housing assistance. So everybody who's been kicked out of their homes or charged higher prices because of COVID, they're gonna extend the assistance for those people. Okay. Also, he's going to have us rejoin the Paris Climate Accords, which has to do with climate change and trying to prevent that. So that's what that is about. If you want to know more about any of these, just go look them up. And then also one of his other ones is to officially end funding of the wall. the border wall between the US and Mexico. So those are some of his executive orders that he's going to be signing into, you know, basically kind of like law. They're not really, it's like rules, not really laws, but rules. Although some of them feel like laws. A lot of them have felt like laws in the past, executive orders. But anyways, so that's what is going to be happening, or probably already has happened while I was teaching. I just saw that this morning, and I was like, okay, those are some new things that are going to happen. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some weapons of World War I, including the weapon that we consider the most effective weapon of World War I. We'll talk about how that has impacted the war. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the realities of trench warfare. Trench warfare was a huge part of World War I. The main source of fighting was in trench warfare. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to watch a couple of video clips. We'll have an assignment at the end of class today. So this first one, any guesses? What do you think is the most effective weapon of World War I? Anybody who has heard of World War I before?
Bomb.
Ooh, that's a good guess. It's not the bomb.
Something gas.
It's not the gas.
Oh my god.
She's the only one guessing. Come on, guys. Any other guesses?
Wow.
The machine gun. The machine gun was the most effective and war-changing weapon, and we're going to learn why. And here we'll talk a little more about it after.
The weapons of the trenches were guns, artillery, and a host of small bombs. The machine gun was the most effective of all.
The machine gun, as with so many weapons used in World War I, was an American invention. The first effective automatic machine gun was the Maxim, which was designed by an American.
Irish immigrant and amateur inventor Hiram Maxim was reportedly moved to invent the machine gun in 1885. After someone told him, if you want to make a lot of money, invent something that will enable these Europeans to cut each other's throats with greater facility. Maxim achieved.
So basically, like, if you want to make money, find something that's better at killing people.
Isn't that a mountain machine gun?
And it's true, it made them a lot of money because the machine gun killed a lot of people.
Isn't that a mountain machine gun?
The what?
Mounted machine gun?
Yeah, so they have, and it's got to talk about it. It's got like this, kind of like a tripod, but basically this mount that it swivels on, you know.
His machine gun's rapid fire ability, using the thrust of the recoil to quickly pull the next bullet into the chamber.
He had limited success selling it to the American Army, so he went to Europe and sold it to just about every country over there. So many of the combatants were using Maxim guns or guns designed based on the Maxim.
Another method of rapid fire was developed that collected the expanding gases expelled when the gun was fired to trigger a mechanism that allowed accelerated shooting. The best machine guns had a range of about 4,000 yards, with an aim range of 1,000 yards, shooting rifle caliber bullets.
The battlefield is going to become dominated by a recoil-operated machine gun, which can spew out 400 to 500 rounds a minute. Not only that, but it has a water jacket on it, which keeps the barrel cool, so you can fire this thing and fire it and fire it and fire it and keep on firing.
Almost as important as the gun's ability to fire rapidly was its ability to pivot. Guns were placed on a special mount called a traversing and elevation mechanism that enabled each gunner to spray rounds in an arc.
By swiveling, you can cover 500 yards of battlefront with one machine gun. And if you can shoot out to 400 yards and then we're walking across 400 yards, you can pretty much kill them all with one machine gun before they get anywhere near you.
The machine gun weighed about 50 pounds, with the boot carrying another 70 pounds or so. It was not designed to be portable. It was designed to stay in the trenches.
This is a very solid mount, so it's not like it's fucking around a lot when you're firing. The crew is about 6 people. Have ammo bearers, and 4 people to carry them out. There's people who keep water in the water jacket to keep it from overheating, and there are people who continually feed ammunition.
Lighter portable machine guns were developed around 1950. They still weigh around 30 pounds, with their mounts adding another 20 pounds. A typical example is the French Hotchkiss.
You can find the same practically forever. Even though it's not water cooled, it will get very hot. But these large fins here, which are basically the feature of the Hotchkiss machine gun, puts enough area out that this thing will get red, guarantee you, but it will continue to shoot.
Watch NFL games live.
I always. And so
The windows in the
abruptly,
trenches.
that I never paused it before, is over. So the machine gun, you can see even just a little bit how effective it would be. I mean, being able to just cover so much territory with one gun. I mean, yeah, sure, you have 6 people to man it, but you don't have to line soldiers up along just to hold that side. You just have one crew, or maybe even 2 crews with the machine gun, and that'll take care of a whole section of land. So it was very effective. I mean, if you were on the other side trying to escape or rush out of the trenches to rush at the other side, would you want to rush where you have a machine gun on the other end?
Yes.
If you wanted to die, then yes. Depending, we don't want you to die.
Why?
Usually in these trenches, the machine gun will be in what we call a nest. So it's kind of just this mound of dirt where they have a hole where you can go through the trenches. You know, if this was under the ground, you can go through the trenches and you can stand here. Here's a person with really short legs, and here's the machine gun right here, and they can shoot over. So whenever you're going and charging at the other trench, you're aiming your cannons and your artillery, you're aiming your grenades and your fire towards these nests. And people have received medals of honor for raiding machine gun nests, because I mean, that's almost a life sentence right there of like, you're probably dead if you try to raid this thing, because it'd be super easy to just kill you. I mean, many times over. So the machine gun was so important because of how efficient and effective it was at killing people. I mean, he made a lot of money because you can kill a lot of people with a machine gun. It was the weapon of World War I. Most effective, the most important. And one reason why the trenches were just stuck there, we talked about the Eastern and Western front of the war, right? Eastern front, they were fighting the Russians. Western front, they were fighting the UK, France, and the US later on. So they were just kind of stuck fighting on both those sides. The trenches did not move. Okay, so you got the 2 sides of the trenches, and you didn't really move those trenches because it was so hard to try to go and attack the other side. They had machine guns. People were dug in there. That's why we use the words for trench warfare. We use like if you're entrenched in something, that means you're kind of like dug deep and like stuck in something. That's what entrenched means. And if you've heard, I think I mentioned it before, but the phrase "I'm stuck in the trenches," because you're literally stuck. Your line, usually in a battle, you know, you have your 2 battle lines, and then if these guys win, then these guys retreat, and then you have battle lines right here. But with the trenches, there's not a lot of retreating or moving. I mean, sometimes there is, but usually it's just those 2 lines, and it just stays that way. Okay, so machine guns really helped trench warfare be so important to the war because you couldn't really move out of it. All right, the next one we're gonna watch is kind of interesting. It's about weird guns and weapons of World War I. So we're gonna, just unusual inventions that were made to fight. A lot of inventions came with wars. We're gonna see some of them here.
First World War technology, weird weapons and equipment. The First World War saw modern weaponry used on an immense scale. Out of this came unique technological advancements in weapons and equipment, but also primitive designs reminiscent of earlier eras of warfare. Let's have a look at some weapons. The gauntlet dagger. Born out of the brutality of trench warfare, the gauntlet dagger, sometimes known as the punching dagger, was worn like a glove or close-quarter combat. A crudely made blade and protective gauntlet made from light sheet steel with a crossbar inside for grip formed this weapon. While it meant the soldier couldn't hold anything else in his hand, it could deliver a lethal impact and inspire fear in the enemy. The trench raiding club. Another medieval-style weapon was the trench raiding club, used by the Allied powers and the Central powers This melee weapon was a quiet way of taking out the enemy during nighttime raids. Trench clubs could be made in very crude ways, such as attaching a metal head to or banging boot nails into an entrenching tool handle. There are also examples of walking sticks that have trench clubs on the end. This example, which is made from a naturally gnarled piece of wood weighted with lead and fitted with iron spikes, was probably used as an officer's walking stick. The flechette, or aerial dart. Flechettes were a feathered aerial dart dropped out of an aircraft onto enemy troops. Used in the early parts of the war, they were capable of piercing a helmet and were silent as they dropped before inflicting damage. The periscope rifle. The periscope rifle allowed a soldier to take aim safely from the trenches without exposing himself to the enemy. The device, invented by Lance Corporal William Beach in May 1915 during the Gallipoli campaign, used an upper mirror fixed looking at the sights of the rifle, which reflected into the lower mirror, which the soldier peered into. The periscope rifle proved useful and was soon used in many frontline trenches. The grenade catapult and crossbow. The Leach trench catapult was used by the British Army to throw grenades at a high trajectory into the enemy trench. The French-made Arbalète Sauterelle Type A, or grenade crossbow, was lighter and portable and would replace the Leach catapult until they were replaced in 1916 by the 2-inch medium trench mortar and the Stokes mortar. Let's have a look at some equipment. Armor. Steel helmets were adopted by most combatant armies by 1916, offering much better protection from shrapnel than a cloth cap. Experimentation with chainmail visors, which attached to the helmet to protect eyes from shrapnel, were made, but these proved to be unpopular because they limited visibility. Along with head protection, consideration for the torso was also given. In 1915, the British first tried out body armor, but it was not universally issued, with enough body armor to equip only 2% of its army. There were 3 types of armor: rigid, hard armor, metal plates sandwiched between fabric and worn as a vest; intermediate armor, various forms of small square plates of metal attached to a canvas support to form a protective waistcoat; and soft armor, layers of silk, cotton or tissue, and linen scraps sandwiched in a fabric waistcoat. The stronger the armor, the more it could stop the effects of pistol rounds and shrapnel, but as a result, the more heavier and cumbersome it became. Armor was issued to specialist troops in the war by different combatants, such as the German stormtroopers and the Italian Arditi. Anti-gas fans. 100,000 of these fans were issued to British troops on the Western Front in 1916. Made from waterproof canvas stiffened with cane, the fan was a way of clearing the German gas out of the trenches. The fake tree. Fake trees were used by both sides as observation and sniping platforms. Under the cover of night, the observation post tree would be planted in no man's land by engineers, allowing the observer or sniper to spy on the enemy in plain sight. Only a few of these fake trees were discovered and captured. What weapon and piece of equipment did you find the strangest? Leave a comment below.
Rather than leaving a comment below, you're gonna tell me, so which one do you think is the strangest or most interesting?
The gauntlet.
The gauntlet glove? Yeah, why?
Just
Kind of crazy how they would, I mean, I don't know, that would hurt. A lot of these would hurt. Really? Okay, what do you got, what about you guys?
I want the big tree.
Big tree, kind of interesting, huh? It got to the point where people, you can get good at spotting fake trees. I mean, because you have to have a tree that was big enough to fit someone in, right? So you can come up in it. So, you know, you've got that issue that you have to have it big enough, but also that you'd have to worry about it, you know, becoming fireproof, you know, for when the bombs are dropped and cause sparks and fires throughout no man's land. Plus it's dangerous getting there, and then plus if you get someone in there and then daytime comes, then it's like, well, how are you gonna get that person out if the other side comes over? Like basically that person is left, if you will. Okay, Michael, what do you think? What was the weirdest or most interesting to you?
the aerial birds.
Aerial darts. And so I mentioned that they were only used at the beginning of the war And that was because once they got the steel helmets, they weren't effective anymore. But at the beginning, I mean, and that's why they wanted to create a better helmet, because those cloth helmets they had before, yeah, sure, it kept the rain off of you and it kept the sun from getting in your eyes, sure, but it didn't protect your head. So how like, every time I watch that, I want to like cover my head and try to protect myself, because that would hurt. I'm gonna kill you instantly, and it's so lethal because it's silent. You know, you can hear gunfire, you can hear when things are being thrown or being shot at you, or even bombs being dropped, but you can't hear these darts. So that's why they developed the steel helmet, and then you didn't need the aerial dot darts anymore, and they became ineffective after that. So our last video clip we're gonna watch is about trench warfare. Trench warfare was, like the machine gun, the most, one of the biggest parts of the war and how the war was fought was in this trench warfare. We've talked about trench warfare not only earlier today, but also earlier times when we talked about rats being in the trenches, about how they were filled with water because, you know, water just goes to the low point, so it's always swamp. We talked about trench foot. You know, you guys saw that picture out in the hallway where the foot was all swollen because the water would just be like soaked in and absorbed into the foot, and so they've got trench foot. Yeah, it looks disfigured. It is so disfigured. So it's, yeah, trench foot is bad and gross. And you'll see kind of some of the conditions, but also like the gas that they, you know, like mustard gas and other gases that they use, it would just settle into the trenches as well. Fighting the trenches, when you're not fighting, it's super boring. You're just sitting there. As soon as you're done fighting, you're sleeping, because sometimes you sleep because you're bored, because there's nothing to do. Sometimes you're sleeping because you're tired and stressed out, but sometimes you're sleeping because you're just bored. Card games became very popular to play. Usually people who were around you got to know their life story. You knew like everything they've done, because you've got to talk or else you're gonna go crazy pretty much. Even the ones who like quiet, they appreciate, and it also helps with brotherhood and connectedness as well, to be able to know who these people are that you're fighting alongside of and trying to protect. So, but it was trench warfare has got to be one of the worst things of fighting a war. There's not a lot of words to describe it. How there's a huge shift from like the sheer boredom to the mass danger that you put yourself in by being in a trench. A lot of people would use the correct word to describe it, is they just call it's hell. That's what a lot of soldiers have called it. And the things that they had to go through, absolutely. They would have rather fought different other strategies, just not the trenches. So we're gonna watch, this is part of the movie War Horse. This is gonna show how dangerous and ineffective trying to rush the other trench was in a war.
Listen to your sergeant! If anybody turns back, if any one of our boys comes running towards you, you take this rifle and you shoot them dead. Do you understand?
You understand? Tell me what's wrong. It's your time. Shoot them. Understand?
Okay, so up your ladder to your work. That's the right one. Andrew's good. Andrew! Nobody's retreating today. Andrew! Nobody is retreating today.
Graders, spiders come going from the ammunition. Yes, I have to go slow to slow you down so they can shoot you easier.
Someone come here. Listen, slowly. It doesn't voice. Right?
X. The weapons of the trench.
You see how, I mean, just looking at all those dead bodies, it's hard to imagine. You definitely feel like their commanders would have a good need to threaten their people like that commander did. If you retreat, you're gonna be shot. Like, we're not gonna allow them, not every commander said that, but it was said. I meant just to encourage, even if it's false bravery, it's like, I'd rather risk chancing of maybe I'll survive, at least I'm fighting for my country and I'll maybe die that way, and I could survive, or if I retreat, it's sure death. You know, in this movie, there were times, it's true, that someone who did take that command post, they didn't. It's not usually empty like that. It only showed one person. Usually they leave several people there, because if the other side comes back and fights against and rushes your side, oh, you're by yourself. That's not a good idea to, defend the trench. So they did leave more people than that, but most people did go out and attack the other side. That doesn't look very fun, does it? No, this is the danger and the terror and the horror of trench warfare. As soon as you get out, millions of bullets are coming your way as soon as you get out. You can see how many people died just getting out of there, right? Yeah. That's why you can't really move out of the trench. That's why you're stuck in the trenches. Because even if you do push forward, if you can't make it, you might eventually retreat, and most people do. They eventually retreat back because they just, not enough of them can make it all the way over. And where he said, don't leave, just leave me. And he said, someone will come back for you. A lot of times, if you're out there in no man's land and your people have to move back and retreat to the trenches because the push was unsuccessful, you might be stuck there. And usually, and if the other side gets you, you're taken as a prisoner or you're shot, depending on what is going on. If you're not like shooting at the enemy, then they'll probably take you to their hospital and treat you and keep you as a prisoner of war. But if you're like if you see them and you're trying to shoot at them or hurt them, they'll just shoot you on the spot because you're trying to hurt them, So that is, Cortana thinks I'm talking to it. That is trench warfare. Okay, there's a lot more to trench warfare that we can talk about, but that's kind of the gist of it. So what you're going to do for your assignment is you're going to imagine that you are fighting in the trenches. Okay, you are a soldier just shipped out to the trenches. Now, the U.S., we joined the war, and this is going to be kind of reviewed. We joined the war because they were sinking ships that had American people on it. We saw the sinking of the ship Lusitania was one of them. So they were killing American citizens. Also, because of that telegram we talked about, they sent a telegram to Mexico saying, hey, if you join us and be our allies, then we'll help you get your land back from the US. So they basically threatened us, and once they sent that telegram, we're like, nope, we can't risk that. We have to have Germany defeated because we don't want Germany to come over here and fight with Mexico to get that land back that we won from them after the Mexican-American War. So that was kind of like the last shot, like that we had to join at that point. So one of the things that you need to mention in your letter is the reason why we joined the war, right? Which I just reminded you about was the reason. So in your letter, you have to make sure you include 10 of these things. One of them is the reason, so at least 9 other things, okay? So you're describing it. I don't want you to just say, oh yeah, we had machine guns and there's lots of mud and we had tanks to help us and airplanes were flying everywhere. Like, I don't want you to just list them, right? You're describing it to someone back home, maybe a family member or someone that you love, a friend. You're describing what life was like in the trenches. Maybe you can talk about how boring it was. Maybe you can talk about the lice and the rats that keep infesting. You could mention something like, oh, yesterday this happened and it was all a big deal, or tomorrow we have another raid that we're gonna go on, and I'm nervous because the last time my best friend died next to me, and you know, talk about those sort of things. You're talking about as if you were part of it, okay? So you're kind of describing it. All right, so the descriptions or the length is at the bottom, 2 paragraphs. Okay, underline the word that you were using so that I can find them easy. I mean, I'm going to read the whole thing anyways, but underline them so I can make sure that there's enough there. Okay, so we're going to start it today. We only have about 7 minutes today, so we'll finish. I'll give you guys about 5 minutes at the beginning of class tomorrow, first thing to finish it. Okay, so get started right now. You can either write on this paper or you can get a lined paper to write on, and this is your assignment. Again, if you don't finish it in class today, I'll give you 5 minutes to finish it tomorrow in class. Okay, guys?